Welcome back. Today I'm going to run through this turbulent week of stock movement for PLTR, share some clips from CNBC with analysts reacting to Palantir's Q4 results, and, of course, explain the moves that Ark Invest made this week, because they are shocking. Let's go. The stock. During this shortened trading week, Palantir reported earnings before the bell on Tuesday. After this, check out my full Q4 recap vid if you want to learn more about the results. The stock trended lower despite what I believe to be a strong report, and then we had the lockup expiry on Thursday when the stock temporarily weakened to a low of $24.50. And on Friday we got a rapid recovery for that drop at least, with many new buyers hopping in. Ark Invest was among those buying in bulk with what I would call a flash sale of PLTR. More on them a little later. And for any new investors to PLTR, I do plan to produce a welcome to Palantir stock video, since this is such a unique and sometimes confusing company. Stay tuned for that. Analyst reactions. There were some good reactions and some bad reactions to the earnings report, and part of the problem was that there was an inaccurate EPS number circulating about, but I do want to play through a few clips because I think they offer good context to how those in charge of big money viewed the report. They do talk a little bit about the lockup as well. I'll be back with my own analysis.
Yeah, and keep in mind, this was one of those companies that has existed for a very long time in private hands before it came public. That often is a situation where you do have, equity spread very widely throughout the company. So you have this idea that there is a wall of potential supply. People have been there a while, been waiting for it. On the other hand, the pattern has been that whatever selling often happens in anticipation of the actual lockup expiration date, and the market kind of figures that out. So we'll see if that happens here. But of course, that stock is up so much since its initial listing that it's sort of playing with house money there, I think, on all sides.
So in terms of the quarter, in terms of the forecast, did it just not live up to expectations?
That's all it is. Fundamentals were alive. Revenue and EBITDA beat. They gave basically a forecast up to 25, saying they're going to grow over 30%. Just expectations were too high. They delivered great fundamentals, and I think ultimately there's a concern of the share lockup coming from the IPO that will be settling in here recently, and so we have to get through the lockup, and then I think you secondarily have to get through, can Palantir scale out and go downstream? Today they service about 140 of the largest companies on the planet between government and commercial, and they have to prove, similar to what Tesla did when the car came out, that they can take a very high-priced piece of hardware or software in this case, and then appeal to the mass market. And that is going to take some time. That is their vision. We think they can scale down, but again, it's going to take several years to go into that model.
Corporate's a small part of the business. They've struggled there. In 2017, they did try to revamp it, break apart their pieces. You didn't have to buy the whole software package, but what fundamental sign should we look for that says, you know what, Palantir has actually turned it around and they are actually going to be able to sell to corporates? Because right now, this is basically a government story.
The government business did really well, but it is a two-engine plane. The government business did well given COVID, and now they're finding new use cases for governments across the globe. Commercial was a weak spot in the quarter. It did very well for the full year. So ultimately, I think what happens for commercial going forward, they are stepping on the gas, hiring at a triple-digit growth rate, being able to prove not only that the largest companies in the world, but the mass market can use their software. And again, that's going to take time. That is not going to happen all in 21. We think it'll happen over the next couple of years. So for long-term shareholders, I think we've seen this movie before. We think they'll come downstream. Short-term, no question, wasn't good enough. You've got the lockup, and the stock's going to take time to settle into that.
Why is growth slowing so early in this story, in such a compelling story, with all the analytics that's needed to run every business across the globe?
I think you're looking at a story again, 40+% growth they guided through 2025 at 30% clip. Ultimately, I think that'll be conservative. The guidance is ahead of that already in the first quarter. So effectively, I think what you're seeing is a story that, again, has to broaden away from these big mega contracts and get volume and not just land the elephants, as we say in software, land the antelopes and land a lot of them. And that motion takes time to pick up. So I don't believe that the growth is decelerating materially. That's their guide. We think they'll be conservative again. They beat the quarter in Q4 relative to where they were at, both on the top and the bottom line. They were way more profitable than anyone thought. They solved the world's biggest problems that others can't. And again, the customer reference checks, support that.
I think you really have to dig into these numbers to decipher and understand exactly the quarter and the year end that Palantir had. We strongly disagree with the top line headline that the company missed. When you really look at the numbers and you look at what the company has done year over year, 1.1 billion in revenue for 2020, up 47%, 322 million for Q4, up 40%, and the company forecasted for Q1 21, 45% year over year. So, those are robust numbers. As far as the guidance going forward, I do think there was an overall disappointment on the street that they didn't raise guidance. But keep in mind, they did not lower guidance. They kept that guidance in line at 30%. And when you dig a little bit deeper and you try to decipher the numbers, realize that the company gave a 5-year outlook on revenue where they put a $4 billion revenue target for 2025, which implies sustained revenue growth for 30% over the next 5 years. But if you take into account the existing contracts that they have at the end of 2020, they already had 2.8 billion in existing contracts. And you take the revenue growth of 40% in 2020, simply do the math. I think they're in a good position to significantly outperform guidance going forward. So we're not at all concerned. The consensus on Reddit or the participation and the buying that came into the company, I think it's kind of in line with other big data analytics and cybersecurity companies that we look at. And when you look at those multiples, I think they're in line. I think an important thing to really point to is the adjusted operating income. The consensus was 48 million. The company came in at 104 million. This is a 116% increase above consensus. And then if you go further and you strip out the one-time expenses relating to Palantir's uplist, they actually earned 6 cents versus the 2 cent consensus. So in our mind, the way we look at this, we look at this as a big earnings beat. And we maintain a very bullish posture on the company.
Still, it gets back to that stock move, Roger. It's trading at what, 48, 49 times sales? So it's going to have a lot more 40% plus revenue growth quarter. Do you think it can measure up? Or are you nervous about any of the price action?
No, I'm not nervous at all, actually. I think the action in the stock, is a culmination of, I agree with you, being priced for perfection. The stock has made a parabolic move. I think it's only right to see some profit taking here. I think there's probably also some shorts coming in ahead of the lockup coming off. But I think once this time period, this overhang of shares kind of dissipates in the market and gets absorbed, and we go back to the key underlying story represented in Palantir, I think the growth prospects are huge.
So was the lockup drop a buying opportunity? At least for the single day following, it does appear so in hindsight. Good job to those of you that decided to buy despite the weakness. But know that the stock could do anything from here. A full recovery back up to the high 30s is not a certainty. Brent and Roger had some good things to say about Palantir, even though it seems the majority of analysts were disappointed with the earnings. So again, great to hear that they at least liked the report. And I will add that PLTR got upgraded to a buy at Goldman, with them citing sales guidance as the main reason. Ark Invest. I'm going to play some clips from Cathie Wood's recent interview on CNBC. Then I'll be back to give you the numbers and why Ark Invest's move to double down on PLTR shocked me.
Why you added rather significantly to your stake in Palantir?
Yes, they reported yesterday, and the stock was down on the report. It's interesting to listen to the CEO. He was speaking our language. He essentially said to investors, we are playing in a massive space here, and we're going to invest aggressively now in order to capitalize on the exponential changes that are taking place here. So if you are short-term in your focus, you probably don't want to spend too much time investing in Palantir. So that's music to our ears because, and we do believe more and more companies are going to start behaving in this way instead of catering to short-term time horizons and we would say in some cases short-sighted shareholders who are much more interested in profits now, dividends now, share repurchases now, than they are in a company investing aggressively, foregoing short-term profitability in order to really to catch some very big waves out there. So I'm astonished. Their revenues are still 61% government, but I've learned, and I think most people in the innovation space have learned over time, that some of the most important innovations in our lifetimes have started in the government, especially in the defense sector and in the intelligence sector. So we think in many ways, and they won't talk about how, but they're certainly garnering a lot of business, which tells us that they are seeing in the future and investing in the future in ways that companies, governments, but increasingly companies are going to need. We have not been spending enough in innovation. And so, Palantir's attitude is refreshing. It's exactly how we invest. We want our companies to invest aggressively. We don't want profits now. We want them to invest aggressively because we're moving into many winner-take-most markets. And the autonomous taxi world is a very good example of that. That is why our confidence in Tesla, going back to the largest position in our portfolio, is so high.
I do also have a video coming on the history between Ark and Palantir, since they weren't always this bullish. I think that'll be a good one, since I remember hoping they would add PLTR right after the direct listing last year. And then even when they did start their position, it was only 20,000 shares. So on Thursday, Ark Invest added PLTR to ARKK with 5.3 million shares, and that was on top of 1.6 million shares the previous day for ARKW. So some huge buying this week from Ark Invest. PLTR is 32nd in ARKW and 50th in ARKK, the flagship fund, as I record this. And this, I must say, is not something I saw coming. Ark is really going crazy for Palantir, it seems, adding to more funds after better getting to understand the company, I assume. They haven't been this bullish previously. I think they could have gotten some behind the scenes demos perhaps, since Palantir does offer those to institutions on their website. But regardless, there is plenty publicly available information to get excited about with Palantir's demo day or even their original investor presentation. So overall, Ark increased their ownership of PLTR on lockup day by 129%, with those aforementioned 5.3 million shares and adding Palantir to ARKK for the first time. And then don't forget, they did do some huge buying the day before for ARKW, but it did seem they were reserving the lockup dip for ARKK, and they certainly did not miss. Conclusion. With a lot of recent buyers, a strong quarter behind it, and analysts as bullish as we could hope for them to be, I think Palantir stock is looking up. I never advise anyone to take any financial action, and you can consider me biased as an investor, but I think Palantir could be ready to have a blockbuster 2021. Let me know how you're feeling about the stock in the comments below. I've got a lot more content coming in the next few days. Until next time.